So, good day everyone. We're going to discuss about Ferdinand Emmanuel Adralin Marcos, or also known as Ferdinand Marcos Sr. He was a Filipino politician, lawyer, and our 10th president from 1965 to 1986. Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was born on September 11, 1917 in town of Sarat, Ilocos Norte. His father's name was Mariano Marcos and his mother's name was Josefa Edralin. His father was a lawyer and a congressman from Ilocos Norte, while his mother was a school teacher. Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was first baptized in the Philippine Independent Church, but later on baptized into Catholic Church at the age of 3. Ferdinand Marcos studied law in University of the Philippines in Manila. He succeeded in both curricular and extracurricular exercises, turning into an individual from a college's swimming, boxing, and wrestling crews. He was likewise a refined speaker, debater, and essayist for the understudy paper. While going to the UP College of Law, he turned into an individual from the Epsilon Sigma Phi, where he met his future partners in government and a portion of his staunchest critics. At the point when he sat for the 1939 bar examinations, he was a bar top-notcher or a top scorer with a score of 92.35%. He graduated cum laude. He was chosen for the Phi Gamma Mu and the Phi Kappa Phi Global Honor Social Orders. And the last opinion giving him is Most Distinguished Member Award 37 years after the fact. And his love of his life is Imelda Remedios Visitacion Romualdez. Imelda Marcos was born on July 2, 1929 in Manila, Philippines. She is an actress known for the Kingmaker 2019, Marikina at 2014, and Der Lanchende Stern 1983. Imelda returned to Manila in her 20s, and it was during this time that she met Ferdinand Marcos Sr. According to the Washington Post, Imelda was working in a music store when she was introduced to Ferdinand, who was then an ambitious young congressman, and they met in congressional cafeteria. So after they met, Ferdinand just asked Imelda to marry him and said courtship can be done during relationship. They married on April 17, 1954, only 11 days after they first met. They had 3 biological children. It was Amy Marcos, Bongbong, and Irene Marcos. But afterward, Imelda and Ferdinand adopted Amy Marcos. During his campaign in 1962, Marcos claimed to be the most decorated war hero in the Philippines, having received almost every medal and decoration that the Filipino and American governments could bestow on a soldier. Among the 27 war medals and decoration he claimed were the Distinguished Service Cross and the Medal of Honor. Ferdinand Marcos was inaugurated as the Philippines' 10th president on December 30, 1965. After defeating incumbent President Diosdado Macapagal in 1965 presidential election. His inauguration marked the start of his 2-decade reign, despite the fact that the 1935 Philippine Constitution limited him to only 2 to 4 years term. One of the Marcos' first act as a president was to significantly expand the Philippine military. In an unprecedented move, Marcos chose to serve his own defense secretary, giving him direct control over the military. He also significantly increased the budget of the armed force. directing it toward civil projects such as school constructions. So generals loyal to Marcos were allowed to work past their retirement age or were rewarded with civilian government posts, prompting Senator Benigno S. Aquino Jr. to accuse Marcos to attempting to establish a garrison state in 1968. So, proceeding to his second term, on November 11, 1969, presidential elections were held at Marcos, and Marcos was re-elected for a second term. He was the first and only Filipino president to be elected for a second full term, and his running mate, incumbent Vice President Fernando Lopez, was also elected to a third full term as the Philippine Vice President. So his second term was marked by social unrest, beginning with the 1969 balance of payment crisis, which was already underway at the time of the second inauguration. Opposition groups began to emerge, with moderate groups advocating for political reform and radical groups advocating for a more radical left ideology. So Marcos used military force against both groups. The most notable of these were the protests that occurred during the first 3 months of 1970, a period known as the First Quarter Storm. The Philippine Constitutional Convention of 1971, which was marred in May 1972 when a delegate exposed a bribery scheme in which delegates were paid to vote in favor of the Marcoses, was another major event during Marcos' second term. So, Marcos' second term effectively ended a little less than 2 years and 9 months later, on September 23, 1972, when he declared martial law in the Philippines. So, during martial law, post and congressional career in 1949 to 1965. After the Japanese surrendered and World War II ended, the American government became preoccupied with establish of Marshall Plan to revitalize the economies of the Western Hemisphere and quickly abandoned its interest in the Philippines, granting the island independence on July 4, 1946. So, following the war, Marcos was only one of 11 lawyers confirmed by the new government as a special prosecutor with the office of Solicitor General tasked with trying all those accused of collaboration with the Japanese through the process of law and justice. Marcos eventually ran for his father's old seat as representative of Ilocos Norte's 2nd District and won 3 consecutive terms, serving in the House of Representatives from 1949 to 1959. So let's proceed about Julio Nalundasan case. So Marcos rose to national prominence following the murder of Julio Nalundasan. So Mariano Marcos' political rival Nalundasan was killed with a single rifle shot while brushing his teeth in his Batak home on the night of September 21, 1935. The day after he defeated Marcos for a seat in the National Assembly for the second time, Ferdinand Marcos was charged with Nalundasan's murder in December 1938. He was not the only accused member of the Marcos family. His father Mariano and uncle Pio Marcos and Quirino Lizardo were also charged. According to the 2 witnesses, the 4 conspired to assassinate Nalundasan, with Ferdinand Marcos eventually pulling the trigger. They were finally denied bail in late January 1939. The evidence was overwhelming against the young Marcos, a member of the University of the Philippines rifle team and national rifle champion. Despite the fact that Marcos rifle was discovered in its gun rack at the UP, the rifle of Team Captain Teodoro M. Calao Jr. was missing at that time. And the National Bureau of Investigation had evidence that it was used in Nalundasan's murder. Only Ferdinand Marcos had access to the UP out of all the accused armory. So later in the year, they were convicted. Ferdinand and Lizardo received the death penalty for premeditated murder, while Mariano and Pio were found guilty of contempt of court. The Marcos family filed an appeal with the Philippine Supreme Court. According to Primitivo Mijares, Justice Jose P. Laurel, who wrote the majority decision, saw himself in the young Marcos because he had nearly killed a rival during a brawl in his youth, was convicted by a trial court of frustrated murder, and was acquitted after appealing to Supreme Court, and saw in Marcos an opportunity to repay his debt to society. Associate Justice George A. Malcolm, Dean of the University of the Philippine College of Law, and the young Laurel's teachers had recently been appointed to the Supreme Court and had urged his colleges to acquit him because he knew him to be a bright student. In the same way, Justice Laurel saw in Marcos a reflection of himself and pleaded with his colleges to acquit. On October 22, 1940, the Supreme Court overturned the lower court's decision, acquitting the Marcos family of all charges except contentment.